Hey guys, tonight we slip into the shadows of a world filled with daggers, whispers, and cold stone corridors. You're crouched on a rooftop that smells like pigeon poop and desperation. Below you, torchlight flickers across a cobbled courtyard, where your first target paces in circles like he knows something's wrong. Rain trickles down your spine. You haven't eaten in a day and your boots are too tight. In your gloved hand is a dagger so dull it might be better used for spreading cheese. Welcome to your first night on the job. And, just a heads up, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where everyone's listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The air bites as you move, slow and silent, across the rooftop. Being a medieval assassin isn't about cool hoods and rooftop leaps, it's about surviving long enough to even get to the job. And tonight? It's not looking good. You've been watching this guy for 3 nights. He's a minor official, nothing grand, but someone ticked off the wrong merchant prince, and now here you are, risking your life for a few silver coins and maybe a moldy crust of bread. You've got a short blade hidden up your sleeve, a bottle of something vaguely toxic in your pouch, and 0 actual experience. Oh, and your handler? He had to leave town suddenly. Translation, he's dead, drunk, or decided you were expendable. Probably all 3. You shift your weight, preparing to drop to the balcony. The wood creaks. He looks up. You freeze. Your heart kicks like a warhorse. He shrugs and goes back to pacing. Lucky break, this time. Historians still argue whether organized assassin guilds like the Hashashin really operated with the level of coordination pop culture loves to paint. But in your reality, there's no ground headquarters. No cool badges. Just a name whispered by someone you didn't know, followed by instructions scrawled in rushed Latin. And now you're here. A cat slinks across the ledge beside you, eyes glowing. It hisses. You glare. It hisses again. Somewhere in the courtyard, a dog barks and your target pauses mid-step. This job is nothing but chaos in slow motion. You finally move. Down the ledge, fingers gripping wet stone, boots sliding just enough to make your teeth clench. The balcony's iron railing bites into your ribs as you haul yourself over. You flatten, heart hammering. This is the glamorous part of the job. Lying face down in mud, rat urine probably soaking through your tunic, and the creeping suspicion that maybe you were supposed to become a carpenter or a monk or literally anything else. You slip inside through a half-open shutter. The room smells of garlic, cheap wine, and something suspiciously corpse-like. You creep forward. The man's back is to you. It's now or never. You hesitate. What if it's the wrong guy? You saw him from a distance. Maybe he's just a servant who looks similar. What if this isn't even his house? No time. You move. Your blade catches on the hem of your sleeve. The sleeve snags on a chair. The chair topples. He spins around. His face is pale. Yours is probably paler. There's a beat of stunned silence, and then he yells, grabbing a nearby candle holder. You dive. You miss. It's chaos, clattering furniture, shouted curses, a broken clay jug spraying wine everywhere. You finally get your blade free and swing wildly. He lunges. Your dagger finds flesh, but so does his fist. You both fall. He's screaming. You're bleeding. A guard yells outside. Footsteps thunder. You scramble up, shove open a side door, and flee into the alley, slipping in your own blood. Welcome to the glamorous life of a medieval assassin. People imagine the job as all stealth and style, but the reality is more like underfed freelancer with a short lifespan and questionable hygiene. And no, you don't get insurance. A mainstream historical fact? Let's drop one in. By the 12th century, political killings weren't uncommon, especially in the Byzantine Empire and across Crusader states. Nobles often hired fixers to quietly eliminate rivals. And those fixers? People like you. Except probably better at not tripping over furniture. And here's your fringe tidbit of the night. Some assassins rub themselves with garlic or spoiled butter to mask their scent while hiding, because apparently smelling like death gave them a tactical edge. You, tonight, skipped that charming tradition. Might have helped. As you limp down the dark alley, rain washing away the worst of your failure, you remember your handler's final advice: if you get caught, kill yourself before they do. Thanks, buddy. Very motivational. You duck into a saw tunnel, rats parting like you're Moses with a bad haircut. Somewhere behind you, torches flicker. Voices shout. They're still chasing you. Of course they are. You crawl into a drainage pipe and press your body flat against the stone, heart pounding. It's cold. You're wet. And you may or may not have a broken rib. This is your first night on the job. Your last night? Could be tomorrow. You shiver, teeth chattering. You think about your target. Did he die? Maybe. Maybe not. He screamed a lot. Could be a good sign, could be bad. You'll know in the morning if your contact doesn't leave town again. Or poison you. Or just vanish. All viable options. Historians still argue whether early assassins were trained warriors or desperate vagrants who got lucky. You're starting to suspect it's the latter. Training? What training? You watched a guy get stabbed once. That counts, right? Your stomach growls. Your knife is sticky. You smell like failure and someone else's blood. You lean your head against the wall and try not to cry. Or puke. Or both. Rainwater drips steadily. Somewhere above, a church bell tolls midnight. One job down. Probably. You're still alive, technically. Congratulations. Now all you have to do is make it to morning. The sun barely rises when you crawl out of the saw like a miserable goblin. You're caked in mud, soaked to the marrow, and, bonus, something bit you during the night. Your shoulder itches like it's growing a new appendage. You half hope it's useful. Maybe a second hand for holding a second knife. Your first successful hit, or so you think, ended in a scurry through back alleys and a cold nap beside a rat family. You don't feel like a deadly agent of the shadows. You feel like a rejected extra from a morality play. And now, you're expected to report back. Report what, exactly? Mission went okay. I bled on everything. Can I have soup now? You hobble toward the safe house, though calling it that is a stretch. It's a crumbling shed behind a butcher's stall that smells like pig entrails and existential dread. You knock the secret knock, which is just you knocking because the real knock is a myth, and slide inside. Empty. Of course. A note sits on the table, held down by a greasy candle stub. It reads, "Job done? Burn this. Then vanish. More soon." You sigh. You light the note and watch it curl into ashes. That's your feedback, Ash. At least nobody's yelling at you yet. Training? Right. Let's talk about that fever dream. You didn't attend some elite school of deadly arts. No grand hall of marble with cloaked instructors and sparring dummies. No, you were trained in the back room of a fishmonger's cellar. Your instructor had 3 teeth and a limp, and smelled perpetually like old ale and bad decisions. His teaching philosophy? If it doesn't kill you, learn from it. If it does, well, you won't make the same mistake twice. You learn to fight by getting hit a lot. You learn stealth by being thrown into markets with a task, steal something without getting caught. You were caught. Frequently. One time you were tied to a goat for 3 hours as punishment. Not your proudest day. A mainstream historical fact for you, in the Middle Ages, especially during the 12th and 13th centuries, training in espionage or assassination wasn't institutionalized. Knowledge passed through oral tradition, mentor to apprentice. If you got lucky, your mentor was halfway competent. If not, well, you're now intimately familiar with goats. Your poison education consisted of licking various powders and waiting to see which ones made your vision go weird. You were taught to identify hemlock, nightshade, and something that makes your pee blue. You remember none of them reliably. Sometimes you think about labeling your vials but realize it defeats the whole secret murder aesthetic. You practiced climbing walls by being shouted at while scaling unstable barrels. You learned lockpicking from a man who later admitted he'd never actually opened a lock in his life. And your first garrote was made from leftover fishing line. Oh, and the motto your guild used? Quiet as breath. Final as dusk. Sounds elegant, right? You learned later it came from a failed poet-turned-murderer who was mostly illiterate. Historians still argue whether early assassin groups in Europe functioned as coherent entities with rituals and codes, or whether they were loose collections of freelancers working for the highest bidder. From your experience, it's door number 2. No sacred rites. Just someone pressing a dagger into your hand and pointing toward a town you'd never heard of. You remember your first lesson in blending in. You were told to dress like a local. That meant burlap, fleas, and adopting an accent you didn't know. You were immediately mistaken for a wandering minstrel and forced to play a lute you couldn't hold properly. You improvised by loudly reciting pig anatomy. Oddly, people clapped. Sometimes you wonder why you stuck with it. The money? Laughable. The thrill? Diminishes fast when your knees go out after a bad landing. The legacy? You're not allowed to leave behind names or stories. No tavern songs about you, no ballads. Only shadows. You've seen others come and go, some vanish into political machinations, others into open graves. Once, a fellow trainee fell into a moat filled with geese. The geese won. Let slip in a quirky tidbit, some early would-be assassins believed that wearing the preserved toe of a dead man gave them stealthy powers. You wore one once. All it gave you was a rash and several unsettling dreams. Never again. You try to reflect on the skills you've gained. You can hold your breath for 2 minutes. You can silence a chicken. You can mimic 3 different types of coughs to fake illness. These are, admittedly, niche talents. But there is one lesson that stuck: always have an exit. You scan every room for doors. You sleep near windows. You never sit with your back to anyone, even children. Especially children. They stare too much. They know. You spend the rest of the day nursing your bruises and restocking your tools. You buy a new vial of probably not water from an apothecary who keeps eyeballs in jars. You get a fresh cloak, this one's only slightly moth-eaten. You spend 2 copper on street bread and pretend it tastes like victory. The street teems with life. Bakers yelling, carts creaking, someone loudly threatening their goat. It looks peaceful. But under the surface, you know there are bribes, secrets, and blades being passed hand to hand. You see a monk drop something into a noble's drink. Nobody notices. You nod in quiet respect. Maybe it's a brotherhood thing. Maybe it's poison. Maybe it's a laxative. Either way, well played. You're halfway through gnawing your bread when you spot someone watching you. A boy, 8, maybe 9. Filthy. Sharp eyes. He's pretending to juggle, but he's scanning the crowd. Informant. You recognize the posture. He flashes a signal. You've been summoned. New job. New mark. No rest for the reckless. You sigh and toss the rest of your bread to a passing dog. He ignores it. Fair enough. Night falls again, and you find yourself on another rooftop, staring down at another courtyard. Different city. Different name. Same fear gnawing in your gut. You adjust your new blade, it's slightly sharper, slightly less sticky. Small wins. You exhale. You move. So, you did the job. Or most of it. Or at least part of it with some conviction and a strong finish. You're not sure anymore. You're exhausted, bruised, and quietly hoping your target was the right guy. But you drag yourself back to your handler's drop point, aching and proud, and no one's there. Again. You wait. You wait until the stars begin to fade and the city rooster performs his daily crime against music. You wait until it becomes very clear no one is paying you tonight. Or tomorrow. Or probably ever. You've been ghosted. By the one person you thought might give you your first real payday. Welcome to the economic reality of being a medieval assassin, the gig economy, but with more knives and fewer laws. You check your pouch. Empty. Except for one questionable copper coin and a half-eaten beetle someone probably left as a joke. You feel your stomach fold in protest. You haven't eaten in 2 days and your last drink was sore runoff. You're what scholars might call involuntarily fasting. Let's lay down a historical fact while we're hungry. Payment for covert work in the medieval world was often unreliable and deliberately obscure. Kings and lords might use intermediaries to hire someone like you, but if something went wrong? Oh, we don't know that person. Assassin? Never heard of them. Poof. Like a fart in a cathedral, sudden, silent, and permanently denied. Worse, you had no protection under any kind of law. You can't exactly report your unpaid invoice to the sheriff. Excuse me, my lord, I murdered a merchant under your cousin's command and was promised for silver. I'd like to file a complaint. You'd be hanged before you finished your sentence. So you make your way to the lower districts. There's a tavern where jobs sometimes pay out. You sit in a dark corner and try to look mysterious. You mostly look like a wet sack. A man slides into the booth beside you and drops a wax-sealed scrap on the table. No words. No nod. He smells like turnips and regret. Then he leaves. Inside the scrap, a name, a sketch, and an amount. 2 silver. 2. You laugh, a thin, hollow sound that scares the barmaid. That won't even cover your bribes to the guards. Not that you bribed them this week. You couldn't afford to. Quirky tidbit incoming, in parts of Italy, some mercenary fixers were paid in bread tokens that could only be redeemed at specific bakeries owned by the hiring lord. Nothing screams elite killer like standing in line behind a fishmonger's apprentice for stale rye. You take the job. What choice do you have? You're out of coin, out of favor, and your cloak is developing a community of lice that are unionizing. But in the back of your mind, the weight of betrayal settles. Not the job betrayal, that's routine. No, it's the trust you had in your handler, in your guild, in whatever joke of an organization sent you into the world with a blunt knife and a whispered name. Historians still argue whether assassin networks operated as organized orders or more as decentralized webs, individuals with minimal support and no promise of backup. You're living proof of the latter. Your network is a shifting group of terrified freelancers who sometimes recognize each other in passing. There's no loyalty, no hierarchy, just fear, hunger, and desperation. You make your way through the streets to the target's residence. This time, it's a minor tax collector. Not much of a challenge, unless you count the 3 guards stationed outside and the angry-looking dog chained near the cellar. The guards are talking loudly about the last man who tried to sneak in. They say his ears ended up nailed to the church door. That's comforting. You decide to wait. Night again. Another rooftop. Same splinter in your boot. You observe the pattern. He always sends the guards to the rear after supper, and the dog gets distracted by whistling, is easily tricked, like your last handler. You move at just the right moment. Creep in through the servant's window. Avoid the creaky step. Slide past the dining hall. Up the stairs, left at the tapestry that looks like someone sneezing into a turkey. And there's the room. You open the door slowly. He's snoring. Good. You take a deep breath, raise the blade, and he speaks. I was wondering when you'd come. You freeze. He's awake. He doesn't move, but you see his hand on a dagger under the blanket. You stare at each other in the dim light. I didn't betray them, he says softly. But I wouldn't blame them if they think I did. You weren't prepared for this. Talking. Regret. Human emotion. You were hoping for silence and a quick getaway. You raise your blade anyway. Your stomach growls. He hears it. Take the coin in the drawer, he says. At least eat before you kill me. You hesitate. Then you take the coin. Silver. Real silver. You leave. You tell yourself it's mercy, or pragmatism, or just plain exhaustion. But as you disappear into the night, heavier pouch in hand, you feel something like shame clinging to your heels. You didn't kill him. You didn't finish the job. You bought dinner instead. You sit in the tavern again, chewing on roasted onions and black bread. It tastes better than guilt. Not much, but enough. You listen as rumors swirl around you. Someone's planning a purge of informants. Someone else says a noble was found poisoned in the bath. You sip watered wine and say nothing. No one notices you leave. Because you're no one. Just another shadow walking a line between starvation and sin. You paid yourself tonight. That counts for something. You'd think that after narrowly avoiding another moral crisis, and also actual death, you'd be granted a moment of peace. Maybe a nap in a hayloft that isn't full of spiders. Maybe a hot meal that wasn't stolen from a dog. But peace is for people with names on church ledgers, not for anonymous ghosts like you. You wake up coughing, because naturally, the straw in the barn loft you borrowed for the night was soaked in mold. You blink the dust from your eyes, wipe your mouth, and find a rat sitting on your chest like it owns the place. It probably does. You shove it off and sit up. Today's challenge isn't a blade or a mark. Today, it's surviving the people who aren't paying you, your so-called allies. You trudge into the neutral zone, a derelict bathhouse turned black market hangout where assassins, thieves, informants, and people who sell questionable cheese do business. You're here because word has spread, there's a meeting. The network is gathering. Probably because a bishop's nephew was found full of arrows yesterday. People are jumpy. Fingers are pointing. And fingers, as you know, tend to point toward whoever isn't there to defend themselves. You're just in time to catch the start of the discussion, which in assassin circles means hissing arguments, subtle dagger flexing, and someone dramatically cleaning their fingernails with a poison needle. Just ambience. One man, Thorn, a self-declared senior operative who once stabbed himself while trying to tie his shoe, calls the meeting to order by slamming a tankard against a table and shouting, "We've got a traitor." Oh great. This again. According to the rumors, someone's been leaking contract details. Jobs are getting foiled. Targets are escaping. Worse, coins are being intercepted. And you know what that means, they're not just angry. They're broke. The name floating through the room? Yours. You blink. Let's talk about the new one, Thorn growls. The quiet one. Showed up 6 months ago, right before everything started going wrong. You raise a hand slightly. I've been here 8 months. He narrows his eyes. Exactly. Historians still argue whether medieval spy networks were so paranoid they turned on themselves more often than they completed contracts. Evidence suggests yes. Entire factions collapsed under the weight of their own suspicion. You're not looking at a guild. You're looking at an ulcer with knives. You try to defend yourself, but logic doesn't go far with this crowd. One man accuses you of stealing his boots. You're not sure what's more insulting, that he thinks you're a thief, or that he thinks you'd wear those boots. You're outnumbered. You don't have friends here, only temporary co-workers. And in this room, temporary is a dangerous word. A mainstream historical fact to lighten the mood, the infamous Nizari Ismaili group, often called the Assassins, were said to live in mountain fortresses where discipline was enforced with iron resolve. But outside that mythic ideal, most real assassins in medieval Europe were independent, highly expendable, and very replaceable. You try to make an exit without being stabbed. That involves looking casual while edging toward a wall and pretending you've just remembered an important meeting with someone who doesn't exist. It almost works. Until someone throws a knife at your head. It misses. Barely. But not enough to keep your cloak from getting pinned to the wall like last week's laundry. You yank it free and bolt. Quirky tidbit? Medieval inns often had secret bolt holes and witness walls, hollow panels where eavesdroppers could listen to guests. You discover one tonight by slamming into it headfirst while fleeing through the alley behind the bathhouse. Your vision goes fuzzy. Someone shouts behind you. You crawl into a midden heap and lie very still. They don't find you. Eventually, the footsteps fade. You emerge hours later, reeking of things that may never wash off, and stumble into a shrine to St. Dymphna, the patron saint of mental illness. Fitting. You light a candle, not out of faith, but because it's warm, and sit in the corner, wondering how your life ended up here. A walking target. A broke, suspected traitor with no handler, no guild, and a growing list of people who want you very, very dead. You rest your back against the cold stone wall. Your muscles twitch with fatigue. You haven't slept properly in days. Your left eye won't stop twitching. You're not even sure what your last mission was anymore. The jobs blur together. Each kill brings a bit less coin, a bit more paranoia. And now that they think you're the mole? You're one job away from becoming someone else's contract. Someone sits beside you. Silent. You grip your blade instinctively, but they don't move. It's Mara. You know her only by reputation. One of the few who survived long enough to get old in this business, which means maybe 35. She looks at you without blinking. "You're not the rat," she says. You nod slowly. "Thanks. But you are going to die. Unless you run." You raise an eyebrow. "And go where?" "I've got 2 coppers and a sprained leg." She shrugs. "You'll figure it out." She stands to go, then pauses. "Just the next time you get paid, don't wait to spend it." You nod again. She walks out into the dark. You sit for a while longer, letting the candle flicker across the cracked altar. You're not safe. You're not welcome. And the one place you might have called home just kicked you out with knives and slander. So what's left? Reinvention. You need a new plan. A new name. Maybe even a new city. One where people don't instinctively reach for their belts when you enter the room. You sigh and pick yourself up. Your joints pop like old floorboards. First step, don't die tonight. You step into the alley, wrap your cloak tighter, and vanish into the sleeping streets. The rats watch you go, probably judging your posture. So now you're on the run. Again. But this time, it's not from a disgruntled guard or a vengeful noble's crossbowman, it's from your own. And that, as it turns out, feels worse. It's one thing to dodge a blade for a payday. It's another thing when the payday is your head. You travel by night, keeping to the gutters and hedgerows like a raccoon with commitment issues. By day, you sleep under wagons or in the nooks of abandoned chapels, half expecting a fellow assassin to jump out from behind a pew and finish what the bathhouse crowd started. You dream in fits, usually of falling, sometimes of drowning, once of singing pigs. After a few days, the hunger creeps in again. It's not just a sensation now, it's a personality trait. You consider gnawing your own boot, but remember it once spent a week buried in a dung pile outside Dijon, and decide starvation is nobler. You finally stumble into a small town with the kind of name that sounds like a sneeze and smells like pickled fish. You've heard of this place, tiny, suspicious, and notoriously tight-lipped. Perfect for disappearing. Also perfect for being utterly miserable. You pawn your second dagger for half a loaf of crusty bread and a thimble of suspicious wine. The barkeep doesn't ask questions, but he does charge extra for minding his own business. You pay it. It's the closest thing you've had to hospitality in weeks. Now you need a new identity. Something less, "I'm here to kill someone," and more, "please don't stab me first." You settle on posing as a traveling scribe. Conveniently, scribes are often poor, quiet, and covered in ink, which is indistinguishable from blood if you squint. You even manage to find a broken quill and a wax tablet in the town market. Congratulations, you're now the worst paid clerk in medieval Europe. Mainstream historical fact time, traveling scribes and clerks did exist, particularly in more rural parts of medieval Europe where literacy was scarce and people needed wills, letters, or legal forms. They were often underpaid, underfed, and frequently blamed for writing things nobody wanted to hear, like tax demands or marriage annulments. You rent a cot in the loft above a tanner's shop. It smells like old death and fresh pee, but it's dry and the rats are mostly polite. You sleep better than you have in weeks. But you don't get to stay idle long. You're approached, discreetly, of course, by a gaunt man with a face like someone punched a weasel into the shape of a question mark. He introduces himself as Brother Eldrick, a monk with delicate needs. That's how you know something sketchy is coming. In medieval language, delicate needs usually translates to somebody has to die, but let's pretend it's for God. He offers you food. Actual food. Cheese. Stew. Honeyed oats. You accept. This, naturally, was a mistake. Over a steaming bowl of lentils, he explains, a rival monk has been preaching heresy. Not just any heresy, one of those annoying, populist ones that makes peasants start asking questions about tithes and divine authority. The bishop is concerned. Eldrick is concerned. And now you are, too, mainly about how you're going to pull this off without exposing yourself as a fraud who can't quote a single psalm. You're to observe, Eldrick says, and quietly correct the situation. No names. No records. Just one clean solution. You nod. You eat. You mentally sigh for the 1000th time. Because here's the dirty truth about this line of work, once you're in it, it never really lets you go. No matter how many disguises you throw on or how many false names you memorize, someone always sees through. Your skills cling to you like a bad reputation. Like swamp muck on your boots. Like fleas in your hood. Quirky tidbit time, in some Benedictine monasteries, monks were known to keep secret journals of their impure thoughts, including urges to slap novices or poison the cook. These were often burned upon death to protect reputations. Or, in your case, they might just end up as blackmail material. You find the preacher in question. His name is Father Tomos, and he's charismatic. Suspiciously so. The man could sell lice-infested robes to a noble and make them feel grateful. You attend one of his sermons. It's passionate. Kind. Almost too reasonable. You're inclined to agree with him. Which makes things difficult. You follow him for days. No crimes. No secret dealings. Just kindness, books, and endless patience. He even gives bread to stray dogs. The nerve. You're torn. On the one hand, a job is a job, and Eldrick has promised more coin than you've seen in a season. On the other hand, you're tired. You're so tired. Of being a weapon. Of being disposable. Of deciding who lives and who doesn't based on the twitch of someone else's ambition. Historians still argue whether rogue agents like you developed a kind of moral fatigue, a burnout from constant shadow work, where every choice carries weight but no recognition. Based on how your stomach knots every time you watch Tomos bless a child, you're starting to believe it. You decide not to kill him. Instead, you fake it. You mix animal blood with wine, smear it on a discarded robe, and leave it near a ravine with one of Tomos's pins tucked inside. You even cut the earth to simulate a struggle. You send word anonymously to Eldrick that the deed is done and skip town before anyone can fact-check. It's sloppy. It's risky. It's merciful. It's also your best lie yet. You leave in the night again. It's almost funny now, how the darkness feels more like home than any roof or bed. This time, there's no handler. No guild. No trail to follow. Just you. Just the night. And one quiet vow, the next time someone asks you to kill, you're going to ask why. Or at least how much first. So. You've lied to a holy man, faked a murder, and now you're trudging across muddy backroads again, your boots making sad squelching sounds that echo your mood. The wind carries that biting edge of early winter, and every breeze feels like it's whispering, should have stayed a baker. But you didn't. Bakers don't have to smuggle letters tucked inside dead pigeons or memorize poison recipes by taste. You're 2 towns away from that monastery mess when you hear the first whisper, the knife is back. You freeze under a creaking tree limb. The knife is one of those nicknames people whisper with equal parts awe and dread. A veteran assassin. Probably myth, possibly monster. If stories are true, the knife once killed a baron and all 6 of his bodyguards before breakfast, using nothing but a belt buckle and a smirk. You once spilled soup on your own wrist and cried. Why does this matter? Because the rumor doesn't end there. They're cleaning house, the voices say. Making room. No more sloppy freelancers. That's you. You're the sloppy freelancer. And if the knife is back, you're probably on someone's list, possibly for real this time, not just bathhouse paranoia and moldy politics. You duck into a barn, borrow a tunic from a scarecrow, and decide it's time to keep moving, not just to survive, but to learn what's actually going on. You've played too long at being a leaf in the current. Now you need to swim. You head toward a bigger city. Not too big, nothing like Paris or Rome. But a place with gossip, shadows, and people who are too busy to look you in the eye. You end up in Liceford, a market town with cobbled streets, crooked alleys, and an impressive number of secret handshakes. Within an hour of arrival, you see 3 illegal dice games, 2 discreet poisonings, and a child pickpocket who apologizes when he bumps into you. Home sweet home. You find a cheap room over a candle shop. The wax fumes give you headaches, but at least the landlady doesn't ask questions. You lie low, listening for news. And it comes. The guilds are at war. Apparently, someone's been using assassination contracts as a front for political cleansing. Whole families erased overnight. Clerics blackmailed. Coin exchanges vanishing into thin air. And now, the knife has returned to restore order. Interpret that however you want. Mainstream historical fact: in 12th and 13th century Italy, rival political factions often hired assassins to eliminate their opponents, which contributed to the rise of mercenary guilds that were as involved in politics as they were in murder. You weren't just buying a blade, you were investing in an ideology. You meet someone, finally, someone who doesn't look at you like a problem waiting to be solved. Her name is Lisette, and she runs messages for a courier ring that is only mostly legitimate. She has kind eyes and sharp boots. She teaches you how to blend better, how to move like you're supposed to be there. You don't tell her what you do. She knows anyway. Your hands move like you've held a knife too long, she says one night. You consider lying. Instead, you say nothing. She doesn't press. One evening, she slips you a parchment. No wax seal, no signature. You should see this, she says. It's a list of names. Targets. Some scratched out. Others circled. At the bottom is a mark you recognize, the symbol of the guild that once suspected you, the one you left bleeding suspicion all over a broken bathhouse floor. Lisette leans in. You're not just running from enemies, she says. You're running from a purge. And there's that word again. Purge. It has a finality to it, doesn't it? Like it comes after the ash settles and the fires die down. Quirky tidbit: some medieval spy guilds were so deeply embedded in urban infrastructure that they ran fire brigades, bakeries, or even managed churches to launder coin and pass messages. You once bought a meat pie from a man who probably slit throats for dessert. You start asking questions. And the more you ask, the more people start avoiding you. That's when you know it's real. Even Lisette pulls away a little, not because she's afraid of you, but because you've become something magnetic, and not in a good way. You draw attention now. Attention that kills people. You start following the map behind the map, hidden messages in ink that glows under candlelight, scraps of fabric dyed with codes, beggars who blink twice when it's safe to talk. The whole city hums with information if you know how to listen. And you're getting good at listening. You find out that the knife isn't just back, they're recruiting. Only the pure get to stay. The rest vanish. You don't sleep well after that. You remember Mara's warning. Next time you get paid, don't wait to spend it. You wish you'd asked why. Historians still argue whether purges within assassin guilds were strategic or emotional, if they were cleaning out liabilities, or just settling personal scores. With so few records left behind, all we know is this: when the knives turned inward, they rarely missed. So, what now? You've got 3 choices. You can run, again, maybe to the coast this time. Disappear among the docks. Sail to somewhere warm where people only kill for fish. You can confront the knife. Suicidal, sure. But maybe they remember you. Maybe there's a way back in. Or, you can play both sides. You choose door number 3. Why? Because you're tired of being someone else's blade. And maybe, just maybe, it's time to become the hand that holds it. The next few days are like threading a needle with trembling fingers, slow, careful, and entirely too close to stabbing yourself in the eye. You walk a line so thin it may as well not exist, posing as someone useful, curious, but not dangerous, asking questions without sounding like you're collecting debts. You sip wine you can't afford in taverns you shouldn't be in, and listen. You learn the knife isn't a name anymore. It's a role. A mantle passed between killers like a cursed torch. The current holder? An older woman named Serene, steely eyes, no patience, said to have slit her first throat before puberty and never once cried about it. She doesn't smile, she doesn't bluff, and she definitely doesn't forgive. And she's here. In Lysford. Right now. You eat that news like cold porridge, without flavor, without joy, because you have to. You don't want to meet her. But you need to. Lisette tells you Serene is holding court, yes, court, in a gambling den disguised as a tannery. They say only invited steel gets past the guards. Translation: prove your worth, or prove your death wish. You hatch a plan. Not a good one. But one that smells faintly of possible success. There's a courier boy in town who used to work for one of the lower guilds. He's fast, forgettable, and desperate for coin. You pay him to carry a message into Serene's hideout. Just 7 words: I know why Mara vanished. Let's talk. You don't sleep that night. Just lie awake counting ceiling beams and wondering if your death will be poetic, ironic, or just plain stupid. Morning brings a knock. It's not a sword to the gut, so that's promising. It's a girl, maybe 12, dressed in wool and shadows. She says nothing, just beckons. You follow. Because of course you do. Mainstream historical fact, secret codes, hand signals, and even messenger children were common methods for underground guilds to operate. Especially in towns too small for official watchmen, these informal networks kept the blades sharp and the coffins busy. You're led through 2 alleys, a courtyard filled with goats, and a door hidden behind a wall of stacked firewood. Inside, darkness, incense, the soft flutter of whispers like moth wings on your neck. Serene is there. She sits on a stool like it's a throne and wears a scarf that hides the bottom half of her face, though you can still see the scar along her brow. Her eyes don't blink. You wish they would. You knew Mara, she says, not asks. You nod. She stares. You feel your heartbeat in your gums. Then you know what happens to traitors. Quirky tidbit time: some assassin guilds practiced ritual punishments involving public humiliation instead of death, like being forced to wear bells or yellow shoes to mark disgrace. Others were less whimsical, and involved boiling oil. Let's hope for bells. You don't blink either. She didn't betray you, you say. She warned me. Now Serene blinks. That's something. You think that helps her case, she replies. You take a breath. Slowly. She suspected the guild was rotting. Said someone was using us. Said you'd come for us all. A flicker of something passes through Serene's face. Anger? Grief? Gas? She wasn't wrong, she says. But she wasn't right either. You ask what that means. She stands, and you nearly flinch, but she just paces, slow and deliberate. You think this is about purity? About culling the weak, she says. It's about survival. The guild isn't just breaking. It's being bled. Contracts rerouted. Names sold to the crown. Someone's trading our secrets for power. I'm cleaning the house before the fire takes it. And there it is. A third enemy. One you didn't know existed. One with reach. Historians still argue whether internal betrayal truly spelled the downfall of medieval assassin guilds, or if it was simply progress, kingdoms absorbing their services into officials' intelligence arms, like France's Cabinet Noir centuries later. Either way, when killers stopped trusting each other, history noticed. You sit down. Not asked. Just tired. Serene doesn't stop you. So what do you want from me, you ask? To pick a side, she says. And pray it's the right one. She hands you a scrap of paper. One name. You recognize it. It's the bald noble from the bathhouse, the one who watched Mara bleed with a face like he was enjoying soup. He's back. Alive. Working as a financial advisor to the local bishop. Convenient. You kill him, she says, and I know where you stand. You swallow hard. You can almost hear Mara whispering in your memory. Next time you get paid. You leave the hideout in silence. You don't sleep. You don't eat. You just watch the cathedral from a rooftop, like some half-starved gargoyle, trying to decide if you still have a soul worth defending. The man emerges at dawn the next day, wearing silks and smirks. You follow. Wait. Breathe. When the alley is empty, you strike. Fast. Clean. He dies confused. Part of you hopes it's enough. Part of you knows it isn't. You leave the body exactly where it falls, slumped beneath a butcher's awning, mouth open as if mid-gossip. The alley stinks of blood and pig fat, and when the city starts to wake up, no one will look twice. Just another night gone sideways in Lysford. You don't feel proud. You don't feel anything, really. That's the part that worries you. Back at your room above the candle shop, you clean your blade in silence. You half expect a knock at the door. A coin purse. A dagger. Maybe both. Instead, you find a single candle burning on your sill. Black wax. Serene signal. You've passed the test. Congratulations. You're now officially back in the fold of a guild that eats its own and trusts no one. Perks include whispers behind your back, double crosses in your future, and the ever-present paranoia that the person complimenting your boots is also studying your arteries. Still, it's progress. Serene sends for you the next day. No cryptic children this time, just a folded parchment tucked into your breakfast loaf. You almost choke on the thing. She wants you to escort a visitor from out of town. No details, no reasons. Just a place, a time, and a sketch of a man with eyes like a hawk and a jaw like it's carved from gilt. You don't ask questions. Yet. When you reach the meeting spot, a dried-out mill by the edge of town, the man's already there. He introduces himself as Aldrich. He doesn't shake your hand. just nods once and says, "You're late." You resist the urge to tell him you were early and he's just unpleasant. Instead, you ask where he's from. He names a kingdom you've only heard of in tavern songs, a place rumored to train spies from birth and execute them by age 30 to prevent leaks. Charming. He hands you a scroll sealed in wax and says, "Take me to your guild master." You smile. You brought your own death note. He doesn't laugh. Figures. As you walk, he asks questions. Not the polite kind, more like a customs officer trying to find hidden fruit in your luggage. Names, movements, passwords. You answer vaguely. He doesn't push. You get the sense he's collecting tone, not content. Eventually, he says something that stops you mid-stride. They're planning to legalize you. You blink. What? The council, he clarifies. Royal, not local. They want to bring in the guilds under crown authority. Nationalize you. Like you're a bread tax or a postal route. Mainstream historical fact, in the late medieval period, especially in the 14th and 15th centuries, European rulers began co-opting informal intelligence networks and guilds into formal state bureaucracies. What was once assassination became foreign policy. One well-documented example is the Venetian Council of Ten, which paid spies to manipulate affairs abroad while maintaining plausible deniability. You ask the obvious, why would killers want to become government employees? Aldrich shrugs. Because it's that or extinction. The rogue guilds are liabilities. You can't have independent blades wandering around once kingdoms start pretending they care about law. You chew on that. Lisette once said every assassin hits a fork in the road, vanish, serve, or die. You always assumed you'd choose vanish. But what if serve means surviving long enough to grow old and die in bed? Or worse, what if serve means betraying everything that made you dangerous in the first place? You deliver Aldrich to Serene without incident. She watches him like he's a bear in a wine shop, beautiful, powerful, likely to ruin everything. They speak in a language you don't understand. You wait in the corner, fiddling with a knife you never learned to throw. After an hour, Aldrich leaves. Says nothing to you. Just vanishes into the evening like a man made of fog. Serene calls you over. She looks tired. Not physically, something deeper, like the weight of too many bodies stacked in her memory. "We're not going to survive this," she says. Not the pep talk you expected. "We can't outfight a kingdom. We can't outrun reform." You nod slowly. So we fracture, she says. Some of us will go with them. Put on uniforms, carry permits, maybe even get pensions. You blink. Pensions? Others will go deeper, she continues. Disappear. Become something older. Wilder. Which are you ask. She doesn't answer. Just presses a coin into your palm. It's carved with a symbol you don't recognize, something ancient, circular, almost fungal. Find the hollow market, she says. Now, here's a quirky tidbit. There were rumors, fringe ones, sure, of secret trade networks operating outside of royal, church, or guild control. Called things like the Hollow Market, the Broken Dusk, or the Everturn. Mostly dismissed as fantasy, they allegedly dealt in forbidden weapons, identities, and even memories. Think medieval Craigslist, but darker and twice as cursed. You pocket the coin. Say nothing. What's there to say? Your world is shifting beneath you, and all you have is a knife, a name, and a coin you're not sure you should spend. Historians still argue whether the fall of traditional assassin guilds was caused by legal pressure, loss of clientele, or simply an evolution into modern espionage networks. Some say the guilds never truly died, just rebranded. You leave Serene's hideout that night with a stomach full of dread and a head full of questions. Lisette finds you not long after. She knows. Of course she does. "You're going," she says. You nod. "Take me with you." You stare. "You don't even know where I'm going." She shrugs. "Neither do you." "Fair point." "So you pack what little you own." A knife. A coin. A scarf that once belonged to Mara. You leave behind the candlelit room, the city of whispers, and the echo of a guild that's eating itself like a snake with an identity crisis. You're heading toward something older than kings and crueler than guilds. You're heading toward the Hollow Market. You don't unfold the map until the next morning. Not that the Hollow Market offers a proper sunrise, just a slow, moody lightening of the air that makes the shadows slink into more dignified corners. The ground beneath your bedroll is still warm, as if the earth resents the idea of sleeping altogether. Lisette's already awake. Of course she is. She's sharpening a piece of charcoal against a flint stone and drawing faces in the dirt, none of them yours, thankfully. You finally unwrap the map. At first glance, it's blank. Then your eyes adjust. Lines emerge, a light as breath, faint as old scars. Not ink, you realize. Scratched into the surface, maybe with bone or something less agreeable. You tilt it toward the thin morning light and see more than a route, you see choices. This isn't a map in the normal sense. It doesn't point from here to there. It offers a web of paths, of places, of probabilities. Each node is marked not by names but by symbols: a wolf's fang, a broken harp, a tree with no leaves, a door with no handle. You spot one that chills you, the assassin's mark. Twisted sideways. A death not yet earned. Lisette leans over your shoulder. What's that one mean? You shrug. Probably nothing good. Perfect, she says, packing up. You decide to follow the fang. It's the closest, and you're already feeling the pull of destiny or indigestion. Hard to say. The route leads you away from the hollow, through forests that feel somehow thinner than before, like you've stepped through the skin of reality and everything's just a bit too brittle. Mainstream historical fact: in the medieval period, journeying outside recognized trade routes was perilous. Most people never traveled more than a few miles from their birthplace. The moment you stepped beyond marked roads or the protection of lords, you entered the wild, which often included bandits, wolves, and worse, people who didn't recognize your name or care about your titles. You and Lisette hike in silence. The trees thin into craggy moorlands. Wind whistles through the rocks like it's telling stories no one asked to hear. You reach a stone outcropping shaped exactly like a wolf mid-howl. The fang. Lisette grins. That's promising. At its base is a door. Yes. A door. In the stone. Weathered, barely visible, carved to blend in. You only spot it because the wind flutters something nearby, a strip of cloth caught in a thorn. Bloodstained. Monogrammed. You knock. Because of course you do. The door opens inward without a sound. Inside is darkness. Cool, dry, and old. And stairs. You descend. There are no torches, but the walls give off a faint glow. Phosphorescent lichen, maybe. Or ghosts. Hard to say. The steps spiral so tightly it feels like the world is curling inward on itself. Lisette hums tunelessly behind you. Her way of coping. Yours is mental lists, escape routes, weapon checks, how many jokes you could make before you start to sound nervous. At the bottom is a chamber, circular, carved from obsidian-like stone, with 12 doorways evenly spaced around the room. And in the center, a table. On the table, a body. Not fresh. Not decayed, either. Preserved. Posed. Dressed in the garb of a guild assassin from at least 3 generations ago. You know the style: wide sleeves for throwing knives, boots designed to hold garrots, a collar stiff enough to hide poisons. But the face, it's peaceful. Too peaceful. Quirky tidbit: some ancient assassin orders allegedly mummified their great failures in hidden catacombs, not to honor them, but to warn future generations. Failures weren't buried. They were displayed. Their missions recorded in coded scripts beside their corpses, their mistakes dissected like anatomy lessons. Lisette edges closer. Think he's watching us. You don't respond. You're reading the wall. Each doorway is etched with symbols. One of them matches the symbol you chose on the map. The twisted assassin mark. Before you can speak, one of the doors creaks open. Nobody walks through. But a voice calls out. Enter and claim your past. You both freeze. Lisette mutters, "Nope." You step forward anyway. Definitely nope. You cross the threshold. Inside is not a room, it's a memory. Your memory. Or someone's. You're suddenly standing in a city you recognize but don't know. It smells like salt and iron. The streets are filled with masked figures moving in practiced chaos. Above, flags flutter with a symbol you once wore stitched inside your boot, the mark of the original guild. You turn to find a version of yourself, 15 years younger, eyes too wide, hands too clean, receiving your first assignment. But it's not your memory. It's someone else's. And they're watching you. Historians still argue whether ancient assassin guilds pass down memories through ritual, artifact, or simple storytelling. Some theories suggest that memory was considered a weapon, something trained, stored, and even transferred. There are accounts of initiates being dreamed into the guild. The dream version of you turns. You're late, it says. You bolt. The vision shatters. You collapse back into the obsidian chamber, gasping like you've swallowed a lake. Lisette's crouched beside you, hand on your shoulder, face pale. Yeah, she says. I hate this place. The door swings shut behind you. You don't speak for a while. When you finally do, you whisper, "That wasn't just a hallucination." She nods. You both look back at the mummified body on the table. Its hand has moved. One finger now points to a different doorway. You really, really hate that. Lisette shrugs. Should we follow it? You sigh. Do we ever not? The map has no legend, no compass. But the pattern is clear, each stop is a trial. A memory. A test. The hollow market didn't just give you direction, it gave you permission to be reborn. You're not just walking paths anymore. You're walking through who you were. And if you're not careful, you might not like who's waiting at the end. Lisette votes for the leftmost doorway. Looks friendlier, she says, even though all 12 look like teeth in the mouth of something that eats time. Still, you're too shaken to argue. The memory echo is still worming around inside your brain, scratching at nerves that don't usually get much traffic. You step into the new corridor. It doesn't feel like a hallway so much as a vein, slick stone, faint thrum beneath your boots, an air that tastes vaguely of copper and regret. You half expect to find a pulse somewhere in the walls. Don't suppose this one leads to a bakery, Lisette says. If it does, it's probably run by cannibals. Wouldn't be the worst breakfast I've had. You walk in silence for a stretch, the kind that gives you time to think, always a dangerous thing for someone in your profession. Mainstream historical fact: while much of medieval Europe feared open discussion of death and morality, assassin guilds, if you believe they truly existed in structured form, treated death as ritual. Some orders required confessions before missions, not out of religious devotion but to clear the assassin's mind. Mental clarity was prized. Emotional baggage could make the blade wobble. You reach another chamber. This one's different. There's no dead assassin in the middle. No 12 doors. Just a single chair, old, wooden, polished from decades of hands resting on its arms. And in it sits a woman. Hooded, still, eyes closed. Breathing softly. You and Lisette stop at the threshold. I'm not waking her up, you say. Lisette shakes her head. Maybe she's the baker. You're still chuckling when the woman opens her eyes. They are entirely black. Not empty, full. Like they drank every secret you've ever buried and are still thirsty. You've taken the map, she says, voice like dry leaves in autumn wind. Now you must carry the weight. You barely nod. You're starting to learn that speaking here is often a waste of effort. She stands. The air shifts around her, not like wind, but like intention. Who do you remember? She asks. You pause. Myself. She smiles, faint and wrong. No one does. And then the floor drops. Literally. You fall, not down, but inward. A collapsing sensation, like you've been pulled into your own bloodstream and shot through a memory cannon. When it stops, you're somewhere else again. Not another assassin's past this time, yours. Real. Unmistakably yours. It's the night you almost failed. The night you didn't kill the merchant in Teruin because his daughter opened the door first. She was 7. You were 17. And for 10 agonizing minutes, you stood in the shadows, blade drawn, as she spoke to you about her cat. You never said a word. She assumed you were a friend of her father's. You nodded once. Then she went to bed. You left. You told the guild the target was already dead. They never questioned it. The girl lived. You think about her sometimes. Wonder if she still talks to strangers in doorways. You're back in that hallway now. Only this time, she turns to you and says, "Why didn't you?" You freeze. This isn't how it happened. She repeats, "Why didn't you?" Lisette isn't here. You're alone. You know it's a vision, a test, maybe even a punishment. But it doesn't feel fake. You try to answer. Nothing comes out. Historians still argue whether guild initiations included hallucination rituals, induced by herbs, fasting, or isolation. Some surviving manuscripts describe mirror trials where assassins relived their moral failings as part of their training, though it's unclear whether these were literal or metaphorical. The girl stares. Then fades. You're in the chair now. The woman with black eyes is gone. Lisette stands nearby, arms crossed. You screamed. You blink. Did I? Loudly. Twice. You rub your face. It's wet. Not with sweat. Where are we? She points behind you. The wall is covered in names. Yours is now one of them. But not your current name. The one you were born with. The one you haven't spoken since your guild stripped it away and gave you something sharper. Quirky tidbit: some ancient secret societies believed names had power, not just in the magical sense, but in psychological warfare. To know someone's true name was to own them. Many operatives use ciphers to disguise not only locations but identities, believing that names anchored the soul to the material world. You run your fingers over the carving. It's shallow, recent. The stone around it is full of others, some familiar, some lost to time. A memory vault etched in grief. Lisette is uncharacteristically quiet. "Why do you think they showed you that?" she finally asks. "Because I needed to remember." "Remember what?" "That I'm not just a weapon." She snorts. "Too late for that, map boy." You grin weakly. The chamber shifts again. This time, not violently. More like a sigh through the stone. A door appears ahead, smaller, but real. It's open. "Shall we?" you ask. Lisette rolls her shoulders. "After you, memory sponge." The next passage is brighter, lit by slits in the stone where morning light bleeds through in lazy shafts. You smell herbs. Fresh ones. Basil, maybe. Something that stings the nose in a good way. At the end is a courtyard. Abandoned, but peaceful. Stone benches. Ivy. A dried-up fountain with moss clinging to its mouth like an old man with stories he won't tell. In the center, a table. And on the table, 3 masks. One carved from bone. One from tarnished silver. One from wood scorched along the edges. You already know what this is. Guild choices. Faces you wear, roles you assume. One is the blade. One is the ghost. One is the liar. You pick up the silver one. It's cold. Heavy. The liar's mask. Because maybe deception is your best weapon now. Maybe pretending to be more than just an assassin, pretending to question the life, gives you the only edge that matters. You slide the mask into your pack. Behind you, the door seals shut. Lisette mutters, "I liked it better when the worst thing we dealt with was dysentery." You smile. But you also know something's changed. The trials aren't just old traditions. They're shaping you. Sharpening something you hadn't even realized was dull. Whatever lies at the end of this map, it isn't just a place. It's a decision. And maybe, just maybe, you won't survive it as the person you are now. You leave Lysford under a dawn mist so thick it feels like the world's been erased and only the two of you remain. You, with your knife and your doubt. Lisette, with her questions and her grin that rarely means what it looks like. The hollow market isn't on any map. Of course it isn't. The coin Serene gave you isn't a direction, it's an invitation. Or a curse. Possibly both. But Lisette knows someone. She always does. She calls him Thread. That's all. No one seems to know his real name, and you get the feeling he's the kind of man who sews new faces onto old debts. You meet him in a goat shed that smells like time gave up halfway through cleaning. Show him the coin, Lisette whispers. You do. Thread doesn't speak. Just reaches into a jar of pickled something and pulls out a scrap of hide with symbols burned into it. He holds it over a candle. The wax melts from your coin, revealing something beneath, a pattern too geometric to be natural, too maddening to decipher. Thread nods once and draws a circle in the dirt. North. Until the trees hum. Then he leaves. You and Lisette look at each other. You ever hear trees hum? You ask. She shrugs. Only when I drink. Still, north you go. Mainstream historical fact, there really were merchant routes known only to smugglers and clandestine traders, often bypassing cities altogether to avoid tolls or inspection. These became vital for illicit trades, spices, forbidden texts, even weapons. In some remote regions, traders used secret signs to mark trees or rocks, signaling safe routes or drop points. Whisper networks before Wi-Fi. You pass into a forest that doesn't want you. The trees here don't just creak, they whisper. The air thickens like soup left too long in a pot. Somewhere in the canopy, birds are silent. Even the wind steps carefully. And then you hear it. A low vibration. Not a sound, exactly, more like something felt. A hum that begins in your molars and ends in your spine. Lisette grabs your hand. That. You nod. Trees. Humming. It's real. You follow it. The path narrows. The forest breathes differently here, deeper, slower, like an animal sleeping with one eye open. The coin grows warmer in your pocket. Eventually, you reach a clearing where the air bends, the ground dips, and the trees twist to form what looks like a doorway without a door. You step through. And just like that, you're in the hollow market. It's not a market in the normal sense. No stalls, no shouting vendors, no stray goats knocking over barrels. It's more like a town built on secrets. Tents made from sails of lost ships. Paths lit by mushrooms that blink slowly, like watching you sleep. People drift past without speaking, their faces covered, their hands gloved. Not because it's cold, because here, identity is a liability. Quirky tidbit, some outlaw markets in early Europe had unspoken codes of anonymity, where names were never exchanged, and even coinage might be wrapped in cloth or bone tokens to avoid tracing. Trade wasn't just goods, it was silence, leverage, and riddles in the form of favors. Lisette walks beside you, eyes wide but mouth shut. You pass a man selling poisons brewed from dreams. A child with metal teeth trading silver rings for broken compasses. A woman who speaks only in questions, and people actually answer her with money. Finally, you find what you didn't realize you were looking for, a tent the color of dried blood, with a sigil matching your coin carved into the flap. Inside is a man, barefoot, bald, and smiling too widely. "I've been expecting you," he says. Of course he has. He introduces himself as the Ledger. Not a ledger. The Ledger. You're too tired to be surprised. "You've held the coin," he says. "You may ask one question. Then you may listen." You blink. "Only one." He grins. "That was it." Lisette snorts. You glare at her. The Ledger gestures for you both to sit. You do. The rug beneath you is made from threadbare contracts, all signed in blood or something pretending to be. He tells you a story. About the first guild, long before the word meant anything. About how it wasn't built on money, but on silence. The first assassins weren't paid, they were owed. They traded death for truth. Knowledge for power. And slowly, the kingdoms realized something terrifying: those who know what must die also know what must live. But the balance shattered. Kings stopped listening. Assassins became pawns. The coin you carry is from that time, older than paper. Carved not by humans, but by something called the weight. You decide you don't want to meet the weight. Historians still argue whether legends like these were allegorical, symbolic stories to explain political movements, or if underground networks really did operate with quasi-mystical codes of conduct. Some documents refer to the old codes, but whether these were practical or ceremonial is hotly debated. The Ledger's voice drops. There's a reckoning coming. Your guilds will crumble. Your crowns will shift. But the hollow survives. You ask how? We choose who remembers. He leans forward. You must choose, remain a knife, or become a memory. You don't understand. He doesn't explain. He places 3 items in front of you: a vial of green liquid that smells like regret, a folded map inked in invisible lines, and a blank mask made of bone. Pick one. Lisette looks at you. You close your eyes and reach. Your hand lands on the map. The ledger nods. So be it. He takes the coin from your pocket and tucks it into his sleeve. Transaction complete. Outside the tent, the hollow market hums on. You've made your choice. Now you just have to survive it. You walk for what feels like hours. Or maybe it's minutes. Time here doesn't so much pass as stretch and snap, like an old rope swinging over a bottomless well. Lisette has stopped making jokes. That's probably how you know things are serious now. She's just walking beside you in grim silence, flipping her knife over and over in her fingers like she's trying to remember what it's for. The walls around you are tight now. Tunnel-like. But not natural. These were carved with purpose, deliberately narrow, low, claustrophobic. A reminder that even a free assassin is still funneled. Controlled. Eventually, the space opens again, and you step into what looks like a chapel. No pews. No altar. Just a huge domed ceiling above and a stone floor below, tiled with cracked runes and slivers of old bone. The walls are lined with hundreds of faded portraits, faces you don't recognize, and one you definitely do. Yours. Painted in thick oils, right in the center. You walk up to it slowly. The likeness is uncanny. It captures your weariness, the set of your jaw, even the tiny scar above your eyebrow that nobody else ever notices. The only difference is the expression. It's serene. Like this version of you has made peace with something you haven't yet. Creepy, Lisette mutters, looking at her own painting. Mine makes me look taller. There's a chill in the air now. Not cold, final. In the center of the room is a small pedestal. Resting on it, a bell. Just a plain bronze bell with a rope cord. You've seen these before. Mainstream historical fact, some medieval monasteries used bells to signal the passage of souls. When someone died, the bell was rung to warn others of death's presence nearby. Over time, the practice spread. Some assassins would carry small bells to signal the end of a contract, not to their clients, but to death itself. You stare at the bell. Lisette crosses her arms. You gonna ring it? I don't know. Think it'll summon a demon. Probably just our feelings. She groans. Worse. But you know it's not really a question of ringing it or not. You're going to. Eventually. That's why it's here. That's why you're here. You reach out. And the room vanishes. You're in a city now. Your old one. Nighttime. The air smells of roast chestnuts and wet cobblestone. Somewhere, a horse brays. A baby cries. You know this memory. It's the first time you killed someone who begged. You're back in that alley, watching a man collapse under your blade. His last words weren't for you, they were for his wife. He asked her to forgive him. Asked her to remember to feed the dog. You'd thought it would be worse. It wasn't. It was ordinary. And that's what haunted you. When the vision fades, you're kneeling by the pedestal. Your hand is on the bell, but you haven't rung it yet. Lisette is sitting against the wall, wiping her eyes. She doesn't explain. You don't ask. This place has a way of showing what hurts. Do you think this map is a weapon, she asks after a while. I think it's a key, you say. To what? Choice. She doesn't laugh. She just nods, like she's too tired to argue anymore. Historians still argue whether so-called assassin temples were real places or metaphors for internal transformation. Some believe they were actual underground networks, designed to test assassins spiritually as well as physically. Others argue they were allegories for psychological trials, ways of confronting the trauma and moral dissonance of the profession. You look up at the ceiling. A mural you hadn't noticed before depicts two assassins facing each other, blades drawn, not to fight, but to offer. The weapons are extended, hilt first, like they're handing over something sacred. A small inscription beneath reads, "Only the knife knows which way it will turn." Quirky tidbit, some ancient assassin guilds held ceremonial mirror duels, not to the death, but as a symbolic handing over of one's role. The blade was passed from one assassin to another to signify retirement or succession. These duels were more performance than combat, and often ended with both participants kneeling in mutual respect. You feel a tug in your gut. Not fear. Not anticipation. Readiness. You stand. Take the bell. And you ring it. The sound is small, but it echoes like thunder. Not outside, inside. Through your chest, your skull, your memories. It vibrates something deep and old and true. The floor splits open beneath the pedestal, revealing stairs. Lisette sighs. Of course there are stairs. You descend together, one slow step at a time. No torches. Just light that seems to rise from the stone itself, soft and gold and full of the warmth that only exists in final destinations. At the bottom, a chamber. Circular. Empty. Except for a pool of still water in the middle and a blade hovering above it, suspended by nothing, glowing faintly. Your blade. The one you lost during that botched job in Tassari. The one they said was never recovered. You walk toward it slowly. As you reach the pool, the water shimmers. You see everyone. Not their faces, but their moments. The merchant's daughter. The boy in the keep. The man with the dog. All there, not judging, not accusing. Just being. Reflections of who you were, and what you did. Lisette places a hand on your shoulder. You ready? You nod. The blade lowers into your hand. Warm. Familiar. It doesn't feel like an ending. It feels like permission. To continue. To change. Or to finally stop. Your choice. And for the first time since this entire cursed journey began, that thought doesn't terrify you. It comforts you. The path twists. Not dramatically, no trapdoors or sudden shifts in gravity this time. Just a steady, meandering slope down into older stone. That alone is a red flag. When something in this world doesn't try to kill you immediately, it usually means it's planning something bigger later. You and Lisette walk for a long while without speaking. The silence becomes its own sort of rhythm, a slow march of breath and bootfall. It's calming, in that way abandoned cities can be calming, right up until you remember you're probably walking into the final chapter of someone else's very tragic diary. Eventually, the corridor widens into what can only be described as a museum. Sort of. Rows of mannequins stand in silence, each one cloaked in a different assassin's outfit. Different periods, styles, tools. An entire wardrobe of death. It's weirdly elegant, like walking through a very exclusive, and very cursed, fashion exhibit. Mainstream historical fact, over centuries, assassin gear evolved with disturbing efficiency. From rope-soled sandals used to scale domes in Damascus to cloaks stitched with flattened lead beads to muffle footsteps, assassins often relied more on the customization of clothing and tools than brute strength or mystical training. Appearances mattered, both to blend in and to stand out when the fear served a purpose. Lisette whistles. Now this is what I came for. Do you think any of this is booby-trapped? Do you mean literally or emotionally? Yes. You walk past a mannequin wearing a cloak made of raven feathers. Not symbolic ones, actual feathers, sewn with the care of someone who either loved ravens or really hated them. On its belt, a long black needle rests in a leather loop. You pause. Poisoned? Lisette asks. You squint. No. Hollow. Probably for blowing powders. She nods. Sneeze darts. Delightful. You reach another figure, this one in monk robes, simple, clean, blood-stained at the hem. The weapon is hidden inside a prayer book. Pages cut to frame a spring-loaded blade. Efficiency meets blasphemy. Each mannequin tells a story. And they're all dead. That's the quiet message humming in the background. These tools, these faces, these lives, they ended. No heroics. No statues. Just clever ghosts behind glass. You stop at the final figure. It wears nothing. Just a mirror. Tall, freestanding, framed in iron. Lisette shifts uneasily. That one feels rude. You step closer and realize the reflection isn't quite right. You see yourself, hooded, tired, older than you should look. But behind your eyes, something glows. Not metaphorically. Actually glows. A flicker, like a candle behind your pupils. You lean in. And your reflection whispers, do you remember why you started? You stagger back. Lisette doesn't hear it. Of course she doesn't. The mirror is for you. Quirky tidbit, in some obscure texts, particularly from the 13th century Order of Red Memory, mirrors were used not as vanity but as tools of truth. Initiates were required to fast for 7 days, then sit before silvered glass until their own face began to speak. It was believed the reflection revealed your opposite self, the version of you not yet born, but already capable of your darkest act. You turn from the mirror. You have enough darkness already, thank you. The museum ends with a door. Naturally. This one opens to a library. Well, it was a library. Most of it's been burned. Books lie in twisted heaps, pages charred or fused together. The smell of old smoke still clings to the air, sweet and acidic. Who burns a library? Lisette asks, horror-struck. People who don't want others reading, you say grimly. And then you spot it. A single unburned book, pristine, sitting in the middle of the rubble like it's waiting for you. The cover is blank. No title, no symbol. Just leather, worn smooth. You open it. It's empty. Until you think of something. One word flashes onto the page, regret. You blink. More words appear. What did you leave behind? Your hands tremble slightly. This place doesn't test your skills. It tests yourself. The book begins to write on its own now. In your handwriting. It records names. People you've killed. People you spared. One in particular stands out, the boy in Baratha's keep. You don't remember his face, just the scream. You close the book. Lisette catches your eye. We're not just walking a path, are we? You shake your head. This whole thing is built to unravel us. Great, she says, deadpan. Emotional unraveling. Just what I wanted from an assassin road trip. Historians still argue whether some assassin orders operated not only as killers for hire but as agents of judgment. According to certain Venetian archives, some believed themselves to be divine instruments, executioners of fate. Their paths were not chosen. They were revealed through suffering. You and Lisette leave the ruined library with the sound of burned pages crackling beneath your feet. The corridor that follows is smoother, polished, lined with alcoves holding cracked hourglasses. Sand spilled in loops on the floor. You step over one and it shifts beneath your boot into the shape of an eye. Lisette swears quietly. I like the mannequins better. Then the air shifts again, heavier, thicker. The walls pulse faintly. At first you think it's another vision. Then you hear something real. Footsteps. Not yours. Not hers. Ahead, a shape emerges, cloaked, tall, moving without sound. Lisette draws her knife. Finally, she whispers, something I can stab. You raise a hand. Wait. The figure stops and lifts its hood. It's your face. Not mirrored. Not aged. Now. The same scars. The same eyes. But colder. You stare at yourself. And yourself stares back. The duplicate, you, but not, nods slowly. Then it speaks. The map doesn't lead forward. It leads inward. You ask the only thing that matters. What happens if I finish it? Your double smiles, just a crack. Then you'll choose. Choose what? It turns and begins to walk away. Who you're meant to be, it says, fading into shadow. You don't follow. You don't need to. Because you know where you're going now. To the center of it all. To the place where assassin paths end, not with gold or glory, but with a mirror, a name, and a knife that doesn't point outward anymore. You step away from the pool, blade in hand. It doesn't hum with magic. It doesn't burst into flames or whisper secrets to you in an ancient tongue. It just is. Solid. Balanced. Worn in a way that matches your grip like it never left you. Lisette watches you closely. So? What now? You don't answer immediately. There's still too much to process. But you notice something about the room now, something you couldn't see before. At the far end, half hidden behind a curtain of shadows, there's another door. Not carved like the others, not stone. This one is made of wood. Plain, weathered, and covered in fingerprints, like it's been opened many times, and by many different kinds of hands. You walk toward it, and it swings open before you touch it. The space beyond is unexpected. It's a courtyard. Sunlight streams in from above, warm and golden, dappling the cracked flagstones and the old, gnarled olive tree in the center. Birds sing. Somewhere, someone laughs. But there's no one there. Just echoes. It takes a moment to realize where you are. This is the place where your order began. Or ended. Or both. Mainstream historical fact, the legendary fortress of Alamet, once the stronghold of the infamous Order of Assassins, was destroyed in 1256 by Mongol forces. But some records suggest splinter groups fled and established hidden enclaves across Europe and North Africa, preserving their philosophies, rituals, and archives in places like this, half temple, half test. Lisette steps out into the sun, blinking. This is nice. You smile. It really is. You walk to the olive tree and sit beneath it. The bark is smooth beneath your fingers, carved with hundreds of tiny initials, symbols, and little spirals, markings of people who came before you. Some were probably better than you. Most were probably worse. All of them walked this path. All of them left something behind. Lisette sits too. So, is this where the map ends? You pull it out and unroll it on the ground. It looks the same. But when you blink, a new path has appeared. Not marked in ink, marked in scar. A faint ridge, invisible unless the light hits it just right. It winds around the old roots and terminates in a circle, exactly where you're sitting now. Well, that's ominous, Lisette says. You nod. Or freeing. She raises an eyebrow. You're really leaning into this whole spirit journey thing, huh? You grin. I almost died in a room full of whispering paintings and emotional mirrors. I've earned some introspection. She leans back, staring at the sky. For a long time, you both sit there in silence. And then the wind changes. It carries with it the scent of fire. The door you came through slams shut. The courtyard trembles slightly, as though the mountain is holding its breath. And from the shadows, something shifts. Lisette's hand is on her blade before you even register the sound. You rise slowly. A figure steps into the sunlight. Not cloaked. Not armed. Just a man. Older than you, with eyes that have watched too many deaths. He wears the insignia of your long-dead order stitched into a sash at his waist. His hands are empty. His posture, calm. But you feel the pressure behind his gaze. You made it, he says softly. Who are you? Caretaker. Or ghost. Depending on the day. He walks forward and places a stone at the base of the olive tree. It's engraved with a single word, enough. You stare at it. Is that a warning? He smiles faintly. A message. For whoever comes next. Lisette frowns. Next. He gestures toward the map. This place doesn't end. It changes. Becomes the next question. The next test. The next story. Quirky tidbit. Some fringe theories suggest that assassin orders deliberately preserved their teachings in oral puzzles and shifting maps, encoded in parables and metaphors to confuse any outsider who tried to follow the trail. The final location of the true archive, a mythical collection of all contracts, confessions, and codes, remains one of the great unsolved mysteries of medieval lore. The man turns back to you. You've held the blade. You've read the book. You've rung the bell. And now you decide. Decide what? If you want to leave. You glance at Lisette. I thought that was the goal, she says carefully. It was, you admit. But now I'm not so sure. He watches you both. The world out there will still be a mess. Kings will still lie. People will still pay gold to have problems removed in the dark. You nod. But here, he continues, you can become more than just a blade. You can become a keeper. The map doesn't need to be destroyed. It needs to be guarded. Evolved. Shown only to the ones who can bear its weight. Lisette mutters, that sounds like retirement with extra steps. He chuckles. In a way. Historians still argue whether the final stages of assassin training were actual assignments or moral crucibles, designed to either break or rebirth the killer into something else entirely. Those who emerged were said to carry no weapons, only judgment. You sit back down. You look at your hands. At the blade. At the map. And then you fold the map one last time. Lisette exhales. So, what are we doing? You offer her a quiet smile. We're making sure the next person makes it through. She nods once. Guess we'd better clean up. The man nods in approval. Then he vanishes, no smoke, no swirl of magic. Just gone. You and Lisette spend the next few hours collecting the pieces of this place. You rearrange the mannequins. You relight the torches. You carve your initials into the olive tree. And before you sleep, you place a small bell on the pedestal. Unrung. For now. You wake to dripping water and the creak of old wood. It's raining. Not inside, thankfully, but just outside the threshold of the mountain. The kind of slow, steady rain that leaks into your bones even through stone walls. It makes everything smell earthy and alive, like moss and thyme. You wrap your cloak tighter, stand at the entry tunnel, and just listen. Lisette appears beside you, a steaming mug in hand. She offers it wordlessly. You sip. It's bitter, with a kick of something herbal and ancient. She's been experimenting again. So, she murmurs, "We're doing this." You raise an eyebrow. Doing what? She points her chin toward the map table. It's open. Again. Not because you were studying it, but because it opened itself. And that's not just poetic metaphor. It literally unfurled in the night like a book desperate to be read. New symbols, new paths. Strange curves that weren't there yesterday. One leads back to the city. The place you fled. Lisette speaks again. It's calling us. You shake your head. Maps don't call. She grins faintly. This one does. Mainstream historical fact, the medieval world was full of living maps, not magical ones, but documents redrawn again and again to reflect not geography, but the experiences of the person carrying it. Pilgrimage routes, trade paths, even assassin instructions were often personalized by each traveler, becoming part journal, part cartography, part confession. You stare at the twisting line. You feel it in your gut, like a magnet turning toward north. Lisette sips her drink. You know what I think. You grunt. I think we're not supposed to stay here forever. You nod. You think it's a training ground. I think it's a launch pad. The fire flickers beside you, casting soft light across the stone. You've grown used to the quiet. The way the halls echo only with your footsteps. The daily rhythms: wake, walk, sharpen, teach, record, sleep. Like clockwork. Like a monastery that smells faintly of oil and regret. And yet, deep inside, something stirs. A restlessness. You haven't killed in a long time. You haven't had to. And yet, there are still wars being fought in shadows. Still poisons poured into the ears of rulers. Still quiet tyrannies no one names because they happen behind silk curtains and forged ledgers. And there are still people, lost, hunted, betrayed, who could use your help. Lisette turns to you. So what if we go back? You frown. Back? To where it started. See if there's anything worth saving. You stare at the rain. Quirky tidbit: a few obscure letters from 13th century Spain describe a small group of former assassins who reportedly infiltrated their own employer's court to dismantle the corruption from within. They didn't use poison or blades. They used truth. Documents. Testimonies. They burned down the lies one ledger at a time. You turn from the rain. Back to the table. You pack the essentials. Blade. Rope. Mirror. The bell. Not the big ceremonial one. Just a small one, hand-sized. Silver. etched with lines that look like rivers or cracks. You're not sure if it's decorative or dangerous. Lisette insists on carrying it. She also insists on taking the long route back. If we're doing this, she says, we're doing it right. The trail down the mountain feels different this time. No ghosts. No riddles. Just the two of you, walking. You camp near a ruined bridge. The same one you crossed in Section 3, though you don't call it that out loud, because this is real life and not a bedtime story. There's a new carving on the stone. A spiral with 3 dots in the center. Lisette frowns. That wasn't here before. You nod. We're not the only ones walking. She mutters, good. I was worried I'd have to be the only cool one. The city appears on the 3rd day. It hasn't changed. That's the worst part. Same walls. Same towers. Same banners, fluttering red over the rooftops. You slip in at night. You know the routes. They haven't bothered to change the guard patterns. Which tells you 2 things: they're either arrogant, or they don't believe anyone smart enough to get in would care enough to come back. You sneak through alleys. Lisette drops a note under the door of a baker you once trusted. You pass the old guild house. And that's when you see it. Your face. Drawn in charcoal on a wanted poster. It says traitor underneath. And hers, too. Though they called her accomplice. You smile faintly. Still popular, I see. She rips the poster down. They used my bad side. You make your way to the square. You don't expect to see anyone familiar. But you do. It's the captain from years ago. The one who gave you your first assignment. He's older now, but not wiser. Same swagger. Same lies. He's speaking to a crowd. Spinning stories of honor. Peace. Obedience. And he's wearing your old crest. Historians still argue whether medieval assassins believed in ideology or simply acted as paid killers. But some argue the original sects had strict codes, like never serve the unjust, never kill without proof, and truth over power. These ideals were twisted over time, commodified until the blade meant nothing except gold. You step into the crowd. Lisette beside you. You don't draw your weapons. You just watch. And the crowd parts around you like they know. The captain locks eyes with you. He stops speaking. For the first time in probably decades, he is afraid. You don't need to kill him. You just need to be seen. That's the new rule. Reveal what they've buried. Drag secrets into the light like bodies from the canal. Your blade doesn't move. But the bell does. Lisette rings it. Just once. The captain drops the scroll in his hand like it burns. And somewhere, deep in the crowd, someone starts clapping. Just one person. But it grows. And you realize something. You're not the only ones who walked away. Others did too. They've been waiting. You nod to Lisette. You melt back into the alley. And the city starts to change. Not overnight. Not with fanfare. But with whispers. The kind that grow louder with every footstep you take toward the truth. Time passes. You don't measure it in days anymore, or moons, or even seasons. You measure it in footsteps across the stone floor, in the number of times Lisette sighs before lighting another torch, in how long it takes for a spider to weave a web across the old door that nobody uses anymore. You've become the keepers. Caretakers of a place that shouldn't exist, and yet very much does. You've patched the cracked tiles in the map room. Fixed the false bottom stair in the Hall of Eyes. Rebound the torn pages of the initiation manual with fresh leather stolen from your own boots. And all along, you've waited, never knowing if someone else will arrive, tracing the scarred path through that impossible map. They do. Eventually. A boy, maybe 16, with a thief's hands and a scared, stubborn heart. He tries to stab you on sight. Fails miserably. Lisette disarms him without breaking a sweat and offers him tea. He drinks it like it might be poisoned. You can't blame him. This place makes you suspicious of everything, including kindness. He's followed the map. Not the one you left, but his version. Different entry points, slightly warped geography, even the tests are scrambled. That's the first real clue. The map isn't a single thing. It's an idea that rewrites itself depending on who's holding it. Mainstream historical fact, medieval knowledge was rarely fixed. Scribes often corrected old manuscripts with their own additions, assumptions, or cultural biases. Some documents from the same order or author vary drastically depending on the region where they were copied. What began as a training guide for assassins in Persia could mutate into a religious tract in Florence or a children's cautionary tale in Kiev. You don't know how this kid found his way here. But you help him anyway. Just like someone helped you. Lisette trains him in silence. You teach him how to read the wall glyphs and make the stew with the dried herbs. When he asks why you do it, why you stay, you shrug and tell him the truth. You never leave a knife in someone else's hand unless they know how to use it. He doesn't get it at first. Most don't. But he stays. For a while. Then he's gone. And in his place, another. This one's older. Woman in her 30s. She's already killed. More than once. Carries herself like someone who's lost the taste for it but hasn't figured out how to stop. She doesn't need your training, just the choice. You walk her through the bell chamber. You hand her a blade that isn't yours, but it fits her perfectly. She doesn't ring the bell. She just looks at it for a long time, whispers something you can't hear, and walks away. You think she might be the bravest person you've ever met. Lisette agrees. You both paint her face on the wall, just a small portrait near the exit tunnel. This becomes a tradition. Every person who enters gets their likeness recorded. Not as a threat. As a promise. You were here. You mattered. Someone saw you. Quirky tidbit, in one obscure corner of southern France, a forgotten chapel contains hundreds of tiny, anonymous face carvings believed to represent pilgrims, penitents, and possibly former assassins. The local legend says they're the ones who chose to walk away. Eventually, Lisette starts giving everyone nicknames. Clumsy Monk. Knife Dad. Baby Crow. You stop trying to stop her. It helps her keep them straight, and honestly, she has a gift for it. You try to remain detached. But you don't. Not really. How can you, when you see parts of yourself in every person who arrives? The quiet ones. The angry ones. The ones looking for revenge. The ones looking to disappear. Some leave the way they came. Some leave transformed. Some don't leave at all. There's a small graveyard now. It started with a kid who got too curious with one of the traps. A reminder that not every story ends with enlightenment. Some just end. You marked it with a stone carved, he tried. No name. That felt fair. He was trying to be better. You all are. Historians still argue whether medieval assassins had dedicated burial grounds or were simply discarded like tools when their usefulness expired. Some texts suggest a belief in karmic debt, that each life taken added weight to the assassin's soul, and proper burial was one way to begin repayment. You've started your own ledger. Not of kills. Of restorations. Every cracked tile, every illuminated passage, every soul that walks through and finds something truer inside themselves. You've lost count. You've also stopped carrying your blade every day. Not because it's not needed, but because you finally believe, deep in your marrow, that you're not just a weapon anymore. One night, Lisette brings out a candle you've never seen before. It's green, smells faintly of lavender and cedar. She lights it without saying anything. You sit beside her. She finally speaks after several long minutes. I don't want to die in here. You nod. Me neither. Do you think this place ever ends? I think it changes. She laughs, bitter and small. You always say that. Well, I'm not wrong. She glances at you. If you had the chance to walk away tomorrow, no strings, would you? You think about it. The silence between you stretches. Then you say, only if you did. She doesn't answer. That's fair. Not everything needs one. Later, after she's gone to her cot, you sit with the map. It's changed again. New trails spider out from the old ones, like veins, like cracks, like the roots of that old olive tree outside. It's still growing. So are you. Morning breaks without fanfare. Just a gradual fading of stars and the slow golden stretch of sun across frostbitten stones. You're not sure where you are exactly, somewhere between where you started and where the map keeps pointing. But the funny thing is, you're starting to care less about the destination and more about the walk. Lisette stirs beside the campfire. So, what's the plan? You shrug. Walk. Listen. Maybe you break a few things. She stretches, groans like a cat in midwinter, then digs into her satchel. You think there's a final test coming. You glance at her. Lisette, you say. We're in the test. She laughs. I was afraid you'd say that. And off you go. You pass through a forest where the trees lean like they're eavesdropping. The air smells of pine and wet leather, and somewhere, far off, someone singing in a language neither of you recognizes. You make your way to a crumbling outpost, another one of those waypoints that dots the forgotten assassin network. This one's half swallowed by vines. The roof's collapsed. A rusted bell dangles above the threshold, its clapper long gone. Inside, etched into the stone floor, are names. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Lisette kneels. Do you think these are? You nod. Names of assassins. Or students. Or victims. The difference was always murky, wasn't it? Mainstream historical fact, some medieval assassin guilds did keep records, though many were coded, encrypted, or passed orally to protect their secrets. There are surviving lists, such as the controversial Codex Azov, which names dozens of agents believed to have operated between Italy and Byzantium. Whether these names were real, aliases, or cautionary fabrications is still debated. You trace your fingers along one of the names. Gyre of Salt. No dates. No epitaphs. Just names. Lisette finds a trapdoor, barely visible under moss. Together, you pry it open. And down you go. This time, there's no staircase, just a ladder that descends into shadow and stale air. It smells like wax, iron, and time. Your boots hit dirt. You light a torch. You're in a tunnel. Not just any tunnel. This one's full of doors. Each one bears a sigil. An emblem. A crest. A mask. Lisette squints. It's like the vault. You nod. Each cell belonged to a faction. She moves toward the closest one, two interlocked daggers carved into a raven. What do you think is behind them? You don't say answers. You've learned better by now. Instead, you say proof. Quirky tidbit. One obscure 14th century text describes the Vault of the Grey Wings, a chamber where assassin sects stored confessions, instructions, and codes of honor for the next generation. It was said that to open a door, one had to speak both a truth and a regret aloud. Whether metaphor or actual key, we'll never know for sure. You approach the raven door. Place your hand on it. Speak aloud, "I lied to survive." And the door creaks open. Inside, scrolls. Not dusty relics, but clean, pressed, carefully stored. As if someone had been tending to them. Lisette reads one aloud. It's not a kill order. It's a contract of refusal. An assassin who denied a target because it violated a code. You didn't even know that was allowed. You open another scroll. It's a diary. Someone writing about their final mission. About how they faked their own death to escape the cycle. About how they hoped, one day, someone like you would read these words. You glance at Lisette. She's not smiling. She's not crying either. She's processing. Why didn't they tell us this, she whispers. You know the answer. Because obedient weapons don't ask questions. You leave the vault door open. And you open another. This one bears the emblem of a serpent devouring its tail. Inside, bones. Arranged meticulously. But not human. Lisette frowns. That's a goat. You blink. Then look closer. No, 3 goats. Arranged in a triangle. Around a bowl of ash. There's writing on the wall. Faint. Scratched, not inked. Let the sins feed on each other. You both stare. Not every cell is going to be inspirational, you murmur. She dryly replies, I noticed. You continue deeper. At the end of the tunnel, there's a room larger than the rest. Circular. Lit by a shaft of moonlight from far above. In its center, a chair. Empty. Wooden. Simple. But behind it? A mirror. It's cracked in 6 places, like spider legs radiating from your reflection. You both pause. Lisette whispers, this feel like a boss battle to you. You half smile. More like a confession booth. You step forward. And sit. Nothing happens. At first. Then the mirror changes. You see a version of yourself, young, angry, righteous. You see another, cold, calculated, terrifyingly efficient. And another, alone, forgotten, bitter. They rotate like cards in a deck. And then, you see yourself now. And your reflection nods. Not in approval, but in understanding. Historians still argue whether medieval assassin guilds had a formal exit ritual. Some stories claim those who left were hunted. Others speak of final trials, acts of atonement or memory, that allowed an assassin to retire or become a teacher. What these rituals looked like, or whether they ever truly existed, remains a mystery. Lisette touches your shoulder. You okay? You stand. Look around. And you realize something profound. You're not in their world anymore. You've made something new. Not by rejecting the past, but by witnessing it. Fully. Honestly. You leave the tunnel. Back into the forest. Stars wheel above you like watchful eyes. The path forward? Still uncertain. But for the first time in forever, you don't feel hunted. You don't feel used. You feel ready. And the map? It doesn't unfold this time. Because it's no longer needed. You don't linger. You never do. Cities love to chew up people like you, symbols, rebels, cautionary tales. If you stay too long, you become a myth. And myths, they get used. Twisted. Sharpened by people with causes to push and not enough conscience to question the blade. So, you and Lisette leave. Not in flight. In motion. Back through the side streets. Over rooftops. Across crumbling aqueducts slick with moss and time. But this time, the map doesn't point home. It points outward. To places you've only heard whispers about. The high cloisters in the north, where ice-buried monks still practice a version of the old creed that involves vows of silence and beetle ink. The sunken road, where assassins were once trained underwater, yes, underwater, in giant stone cisterns older than memory. And the bone vault. Yeah. That one sounds lovely. Mainstream historical fact, as the assassin sect spread, they splintered. Some became rigid brotherhoods with uniforms and chants, others evolved into ghostly legends that passed their knowledge through families or songs. A few, especially those in isolated mountain or desert communities, created entirely new rituals, many lost to time. You don't know what's at the end of this path. But the map is clear. There's more to learn. More to undo. You stop at a village halfway up a mountain where the trees grow sideways and the fog makes your skin buzz. There, an old woman speaks of a bleeding library that houses forbidden truths. You think she's just rambling until Lisette points out her tattoos match an emblem on the map. You trade her a story for a direction. That's the new currency, apparently. Next comes the Valley of Masks. No names there. Only faces painted in chalk, worn for exactly 1 day before being burned at dusk. You and Lisette trade disguises with a merchant caravan. Lisette chooses one with a huge grin and crooked eyes. You choose the plainest one. It feels appropriate. Quirky tidbit, one fringe theory suggests that some medieval assassin sect survived for centuries by disguising themselves as traveling theater troupes. Plays were used to pass messages, test initiates, and even cover assassinations. One particularly odd performance in Prague ended with the mayor of the city accidentally falling from a balcony mid-applause. At night, around their fire, someone plays a broken harp. You share a meal that tastes like nothing you've ever had, sweet, then sour, then warm in your throat like cinnamon and sorrow. Lisette leans over and whispers, "This is the weirdest pilgrimage I've ever been on." You grin. You've only been on one. She sips the soup again. Exactly. You climb the ridge at dawn. The air gets thinner. You start seeing symbols carved into stone outcrops. Circles inside circles. Birds with human eyes. And the map? It's vibrating. Okay, not literally. But something in your chest is. Like a pulse. Like anticipation. You reach a plateau shaped like a handprint. At the center, a spire of rock juts upward with impossible symmetry. It's clearly artificial, even though it looks natural. There's no door. No path. Just silence. Lisette approaches it, presses a finger to the surface. Nothing. You do the same. Still nothing. Then, in a moment that makes no sense and yet feels entirely right, you each draw your blades, not to fight, but to offer. You slide them into the rock. It accepts them. Like the mountain itself breathes in. And the spire splits. Historians still argue whether some assassin strongholds were hidden in natural formations, caves, cliffs, volcanoes, and whether these entrances required symbolic gestures, passwords, or even blood. Some claim such stories are pure myth. Others say they're just forgotten truths. Inside the spire is a staircase. Descending. Of course. You go down. Each step feels older than the one before. You pass frescoes, not of battles, but of debates. People arguing over justice. Drawing lines in the sand. Rewriting rules. And at the very bottom, a circular chamber. In its center? A bowl of water. That's it. No gold. No scrolls. No guards. Lisette walks over and stares in. Then frowns. It's just a reflection. You do the same. You see yourself. Tired. Worn. Wiser. Then the water ripples. And you see others. Not physically, reflections. Flickers. You recognize some. The kid with the thief's hands. The woman who never rang the bell. The captain you didn't kill. Even Lisette, years ago, smirking behind a training mask. Then your reflection returns. And beside it, the spire. The one you just entered. Except now it's crumbling. You blink. It's still intact. But the message is clear. This place isn't a sanctuary. It's a question. What are you going to do with everything you've learned? Are you ready to break the cycle? You back away. Lisette exhales slowly. So, that was subtle. You both sit. There's nothing else to find here. Only what you brought. The map folds itself again. This time, the routes aren't twisted. They're straight. Simple. Clean. They lead out. Everywhere. And you realize something you've been avoiding for a long time. This isn't about assassins. It never really was. It's about choice. About seeing the knife in your hand and deciding what to do next. You don't need orders. You don't need titles. You are the creed now. Whatever that means. You and Lisette walk back to the surface. She hums an old song. Something your first mentor used to whistle. You never knew the words. You still don't. But it sounds right. You walk until the stars come out. Then you sleep. Tomorrow, you choose a direction. And for once, it won't be chosen for you. The morning air is crisp, sharp as a whetted blade, but for once you don't mind the sting. You're walking slower now, not because your legs tire, but because your mind needs the space to catch up. Lisette is quiet beside you, humming that old tune again, the one with no words but plenty of meaning, like a secret you never learned but somehow always knew. You pass an abandoned chapel, its stones moss-covered, windows broken, sunlight casting fractured patterns on the dirt floor. Inside, faint echoes of prayers and whispered schemes hang in the air. The scent of damp wood and candle wax lingers like a memory you can't quite place. You reach out and touch the altar, rough and cold, feeling the grain of time beneath your fingers. It strikes you, this place, like the life you've led, is both sacred and profane, a contradiction wrapped in shadow and light. Mainstream historical fact, medieval assassins were often entangled with religious institutions, some even trained within monastic orders, using sacred spaces as fronts or sanctuaries. The infamous Order of the Assassins in the Levant reportedly blended spiritual devotion with lethal politics, blurring lines historians still debate to this day. You crouch, running your hand along the floor, and notice a faint carving, a serpent coiled around a sword, an ancient symbol you've seen before, now illuminated by a stray beam of sunlight. It's a reminder of everything you've discovered, loyalty and betrayal intertwined, justice and vengeance inseparable. Suddenly, a breeze stirs the tattered tapestries hanging on the walls. You hear it, a soft whisper, almost like a voice carried on the wind. Remember. Lisette looks at you, eyes wide, then smiles softly. I think we're supposed to. You nod. You think back to the names in the stone floor, the locked vault, the fractured mirror. All the ghosts you met along the way, the young assassin burning with fury, the old one longing for peace, the ones who refused the kill. They're not just stories. They're part of the blood you carry now. You stand and stretch. The sun has climbed higher, warming your skin, drying the chill in your bones. Ahead, the path forks. One way leads back toward the known world, the other disappears into wildwoods where legends say the last true assassins vanished. Lisette tilts her head. Which way? You glance at her, half joking, half serious. Does it matter? She grins. I suppose not. But maybe it's time we make our own way. Quirky tidbit. Some fringe historians suggest that medieval assassins didn't just vanish or die out but assimilated into local communities, morphing into folk heroes, wandering minstrels, or even secret keepers of ancient wisdom, hidden in plain sight. Whether that's hopeful myth or grounded truth is still hotly contested. You take a deep breath and choose the path into the wild. Not because you're running from anything, but because you're running toward something you've only just begun to understand. The forest envelops you like a velvet cloak, dense, mysterious, alive with the rustle of leaves and the distant call of a lone owl. You feel the weight of the past fall away bit by bit, replaced by a quiet determination. Lisette walks beside you, the crunch of twigs beneath her boot syncing with your heartbeat. You realize this journey isn't about the kills, the codes, or the shadows anymore. It's about the stories. Your story. The ones you'll write with your own hands. You glance up as a shaft of sunlight breaks through the canopy, illuminating a clearing ahead. In the center stands an ancient stone circle, worn smooth by time and weather. You pause. The air feels different here, a sacred, heavy with possibility. Lisette looks at you expectantly. You step forward. Place your palm on the stone. And whisper, this is where it ends, and begins. Historians still argue whether stone circles and megaliths were used by medieval secret societies for initiation rites or spiritual ceremonies, or if they're merely remnants of older, unrelated cultures. The truth remains elusive, lost in layers of folklore and fragmented records. As you stand there, the wind carries a faint melody, not from any instrument, but from the earth itself, humming in time with your pulse. It's as if the land remembers every footstep, every secret whispered, every life sacrificed. You close your eyes. Breathe in the moment. And let the past dissolve into the quiet promise of tomorrow. The forest exhales around you, leaves whispering secrets in a language older than words. You take a step, then another, feeling the soil beneath your boots shift softly, a grounding reminder that, no matter how tangled the past, you're still here. Still moving. Still alive. Lisette falls into step beside you, her breath steady, her presence a steady anchor. You don't say much, words feel heavy now, like worn leather stretched too thin. Instead, you listen, the snap of a twig, the distant cry of a hawk, the faint rustle of something unseen moving just beyond the shadows. You remember the sharp, bitter taste of fear when you first took up the blade. The cold sweat, the endless night spent praying for silence. The weight of a life lived in the dark, waiting for the moment the knife would fall. And how it never quite fell cleanly. You glance at Lisette, and she catches your eye. No need to say it aloud, the hunt, the secrets, the betrayals, they're behind you now. Mainstream historical fact, many medieval assassins were bound by strict codes, but these codes varied widely, often influenced by local customs, religious beliefs, or political alliances. Some guilds forbade killing women or clergy, others allowed only certain types of targets. The variation reflects a complex web of moral and practical considerations still debated by historians. You pause at a brook, the water clear and cold. You kneel, cupping your hands to drink, and the cool rush reminds you of simpler things, of moments not stained by violence or silence, but by the raw pulse of life itself. Lisette kneels beside you, dipping her fingers in the water and tracing patterns on the stone. You think there's peace for us? You smile, a slow, tired curve. Maybe. Or maybe peace is just knowing when to stop looking. You lean back against a tree, feeling the rough bark press into your skin. Above, the canopy shifts, filtering sunlight like a stained glass window. You close your eyes and let the world fade softly, the tension in your muscles unwinding like a spool of thread. Quirky tidbit: some fringe theories propose that medieval assassins practiced early forms of meditation and mindfulness to steady their nerves and sharpen focus, centuries before these techniques became popular in the modern West. Whether this was widespread or confined to isolated sects remains a topic of lively scholarly debate. A gentle breeze brushes your face, carrying the scent of wildflowers and distant rain. It's almost enough to lull you into sleep, if not for the ever-present memory of the knife in your hand, the choices you made, and those you still must make. Historians still argue whether the image of the lonely assassin was a romantic invention or an everyday reality. Did these killers truly work alone, or were they part of intricate networks, supported by friends, family, and informants? The records are incomplete, shadows within shadows. You breathe in again, slowly, deliberately. Let the quiet settle. Let the dark slip away. And as the forest hums softly around you, you realize something else. This journey isn't about running anymore. It's about living. Right here. Right now. You open your eyes. The path ahead is still long, still uncertain. But you walk it without fear. Because, for once, you carry more than a blade. You carry hope. Now, as your eyelids grow heavy and the world softens into a gentle blur, remember this: history is not just a collection of names, dates, and battles. It's the pulse beneath your skin, the echo of footsteps long gone but never truly vanished. The lives that shape the shadows you walk through, sometimes frightening, sometimes inspiring, always human. You've traveled through stone and silence, through secrets whispered in dark alleys and truths carved in cold rock. And though the path was winding and fraught with doubt, you made it through. So rest now. Let the night cradle you like an old friend. Feel the cool air on your face, the steady rhythm of your breath, the quiet promise that dawn will come again. Whatever tomorrow brings, you've already faced the hardest part, knowing who you are when no one is watching, when the masks fall away. Sleep well. Dream gently. And when you wake, carry this journey with you, not as a burden, but as a lantern lighting your way forward. Good night.